In the 1990s, the Sony PlayStation became a massive hit globally. Whether it be in Japan or the United States, the console was held in high regard due to both its sound and 3D capabilities. One of the most famous examples was Crash Bandicoot, developed by Naughty Dog. However, what you might not know is that in Japan, Crash Bandicoot is also one of the best examples of localization to have occurred. To explain, the original trilogy has various localization changes occur to accommodate to Japanese culture. These include the likes of an included in-game tutorial, original 3D renders, localized textures, so on and so forth. This would also help make the series a giant in the country from its inclusive accessibility, and the character designs being made into more simplistic, cutesy versions and outside promotional content. One such example is the magazine Coco having 3 different manga series dedicated to the Bandicoot. Due to said magazine's copyright, that is not the topic of this video. Earlier this year, I made a poll regarding what video I should make. I originally planned on either my Hunter x Hunter game analysis or a retrospective on the various Crash manga series. However, the latter had 2 issues occur. The first would be the magazine, Coco, having an issue with copyright, where some videos dedicated to the recent Sonic Shadow Generations manga have been taken down due to said copyright. The second issue would be accessibility. While the first 2 series have been found and translated, the last of these is not as fortunate, where scans are scattered throughout the internet without any form of pre-existing translation. This also isn't getting into the issue of trying to find interviews from the mangakas, or purchasing copies of Coco magazine just for chapters that aren't available. But then, I had an idea. What if I analyzed the localization changes made to one of the games post-Naughty Dog? This then leads to the actual topic of this video, Crash Twinsanity. As you likely know, Crash Twinsanity is the 5th main installment in the Crash Bandicoot series. 3 years after Wrath of Cortex, Crash Bandicoot and Dr. Cortex are forced to team up to defeat the evil twins to prevent them taking over the Wumpa Islands. The game is notorious for having a troubled development and various glitches throughout, where you either love it or hate it. The same sentiment is shared by Japanese players, where debates have occurred on whether the game is a kusoge, aka crappy game. What I am mainly interested in is any notable differences between the Japanese version and the Western releases both in Europe and the US. With that, through playing this version myself and looking through the cutting room floor, I've compiled various differences I noticed. Before even beginning with the game itself though, just by looking through the box and manual, an abundant amount of changes can be seen. The characters are either depicted in cutesy 3D renders, or simply redraws to appeal more to Japanese audiences. However, graphics-wise, the game itself is only changed for the text and crate designs. The latter case is a holdover from previous installments, making the TNT crates bombs, and nitros being listed in katakana, due to the usage of English. For the title itself, it roughly translates to Crash Bandicoot 5, Crash and Cortex's ambitions, which seems to be referencing them having the same goal in this game. Furthermore, the title cards seen when pausing were also localized into different names. To prevent having to go over them later, we'll cover them now. If you happen to notice anything listed here is mistranslated, feel free to leave a comment. The 4 main worlds are as follows. Insanity Island was changed to Weird Surprise Island, aka Henteko Doki Shima. The ice lair is Hyozan Labo, aka Ice Mountain Lab. Academy of Evil is simply Waru School, translating to Evil School. And Twinsanity Island is the same as Insanity Island's localization with a W added. Said W likely stands for Warui, which means evil and seems to be going along with the Yen initial theme. Onto the individual levels. The Insanity levels are cobbled jungle, in a tight spot with ants, and buzzing great offense. The second of these, I am more iffy on the translation, but admittedly didn't know how else to phrase it. Interestingly, the word for ant in this game is written with both hiragana and katakana, with the latter typically being used for borrowed words. This seems to have been intended to make the ant enemies more alien-like and reference them coming from another dimension. For the ice section, the levels are called Chilly Iceland, Slippery Slope Cortex, and Uproar at Sea. Academy of Evil consists of Let's Go Boiler, Chaotic Classroom, and Evil Party Big Hustle. Worth noting, the last of these could also be translated as Party of Evil Big Hustle, but both get the same point across. Finally, the Twinsanity Island section includes Rolling Rocks Go, Chase the Fake Bandicoot, and lastly, Crackling Ant Hell. Worth noting, fake crashes also refer to the same word of mise, but as to whether this was intended is beyond me. Also, I am not kidding about what Ant Agony was translated to. This is legitimately what it says on G-Shoal. I am not kidding. There is no other way to translate this. Now we can actually look through the game. To make things simple, let's go through the differences listed on the game's cutting room floor page, as a few might actually shock you. As mentioned, the textures were changed for the crates and title to allow for accessibility. There's not really much to go over regarding that. There are a few instances where subtitles are used for tutorials and NPCs, such as the first island's boat. As such, a custom font was made for both hiragana and katakana text for the tutorial. Like in the Rayman 2 localization, this seems to have been done to save time and it being made in-house. The title screen also has a brand new 3D model which bounces about. For particular differences between this version and the NA release, Japanese Twinsanity's reward for 100% is the test animations montage the European release has. It also shares a few crash fixes from set release. Despite this, the Japanese version has become notorious for having evil Crash occasionally run in circles due to pathing issues. Before you ask, the chase is typically skipped by speedrunners and doesn't help speed up Cortex himself, so it holds no actual speed tech tricks. The Rusty Walrus chase is of more benefit though, due to the present bugs, and is also more likely to glitch out. But it is worth noting the NA version of the Rusty section does have a few similar reports. Perhaps the most interesting bug fix in this edition is in regards to Coco. After she is accidentally knocked out in Cortex's lab, the player can run into her, which causes damage and could potentially kill you. The Japanese version, however, removes this glitch, yet the Tikimon glitch remains. This seems to have come from beta testing in the region, having it be noticed while not being spotted for the Western releases. There was also an interesting quirk where, when attempting to drag Cortex to the fence side of former Ernest's house, Neo will promptly let go. I personally believe this is a glitch, but there is an argument to be made about it being a correction for a glitch. To my knowledge, though, the fence isn't capable of anything game-breaking. Localization-wise, menu actions or skipping the CGI cutscenes involve hitting the circle button instead of X. This is due to Japanese culture seeing circle as a yes or okay prompt, and thus being the case for Japanese PlayStation 2 units. An interesting change is in regards to the live system. To quote the cutting room floor article, lives are reduced and shown immediately when the death animation starts, rather than after the fade out. This seems to have been done to make it more clear the characters died. Furthermore, in the game's gem gallery, a few of the artworks give characters more fingers. This is a very common change prior to the modern day, where 4 fingers are given an additional one to give a full hand. Localization teams will either attribute this to the association with finger cutting from the Yakuza or the Burakumen. Burakumen, as defined by Ruben Marquez, then brought into English by the Geek website, were a marginalized low-class group from 400 years ago that typically worked in the likes of butchery and grave digging. As such, they were discriminated against for their upbringing and work association with death. Like the Yakuza, they have become associated with 4 fingers. Thus, this is a case of preventing cultural and discriminatory offense for those with Burakumen ancestors. But even this alteration isn't fully the case, as, when going through the gems I collected in my own playthrough, only 2 of the storyboards had alterations. Said alterations are even inconsistent, as one particular drawing for Classroom Chaos only changed one of the hands. There is also concept art for the Bee Chase section, where Cortex's hand is kept the same. By all means, there may be more, but this seems to have only affected the storyboard section. Now that we have that covered, as you surely might have guessed, the Japanese release has its own dub. As far as I'm concerned, this is the case for all mainline PlayStation games, minus Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant, which were never released for Japanese PlayStation 2 consoles. A few notable voice actors include the late Shozo Iizuka as Cortex, and the Evil Twins having 2 voice actors instead of 1. Said actors are Shinpachi Tsuji as Victor, and Setsuji Sato as Maurice. Mr. Sato, interestingly, also voiced Entrance in Nitro Kart. Referring back to Cortex, though, it is worth noting that during the Humiliskate and Partner sections, Lex Lane's performance can still be heard for the yelling samples. So, in a way, he also has 2 voice actors. Characters such as Uka Uka and Engine were also given voice effects for their performances. Except for when Engine yells randomly in the battleship where the line remains the same. However, the most interesting voice is of the character who appears the least, Coco. Coco is voiced by Emma Kogue, but in the credits, she is also listed as voicing fake Coco. This seems to be referring to the evil Coco concept, where an evil counterpart of Coco was intended to be added before being cut. But said concept only reached the modeling stage and never ended up in the game files. Does this mean she was planned to voice her prior to the character being cut? Nina's Japanese VA, Satomi Kouruki, is also credited for voicing Cute Creatures, which seems to be referencing the cut level Gone a Bit Coco. Either way, it appears to be an issue caused by miscommunication than anything actually occurring. Akin to my previous video covering the localization for Rayman 2 on the Dreamcast, I thought it would be fun to briefly go over what first-person pronouns a few characters use. First-person pronouns, unlike English, can be used to indicate a character's personality or gender. The obvious case here would be Dr. Neo Cortex. Cortex uses washi, which is typically used by old or wise characters. Here, it is mainly a case of indicating his age. It is worth noting that both Aku Aku and Uka Uka also use washi. During the cutscene where the airship flies off, he briefly uses when speaking to Nina, likely due to her being his niece. Watashi is gender neutral but seen as a kinder pronoun, and typically the first one people learn. The Evil Twins, Victor and Maurice, use ore tachi when referring to themselves. Ore is a masculine pronoun, while tachi is an indicator that the person is speaking about multiple people. So basically just a masculine way of saying we. Crash does not speak and thus has no in-game pronouns. However, the manga does have him use oira. We're not talking about the manga though, so not important. While I'm still here, something I haven't seen discussed as much is the dialogue differences. I wouldn't say they are abundant, but a few lines were changed that I felt should be mentioned. Going through the game's entire script isn't exactly feasible for myself, so I primarily focused on Cortex's dialogue. If you happen to notice that I mistranslated anything, feel free to leave a comment and I'll add it to the pinned message and description. Let's start off with the first scene, where he shoots Coco. In the original game, Cortex calls her my insipid angel, but in the Japanese version has him say, aka Princess Idiot. After arriving at the iceberg lair, Cortex is eventually confronted by his penguin henchmen for being unable to pay them. The English version has him say,
well, the past few years have kind of been slow. Wrath of Cortex didn't do as well as we'd hoped, and...
In the Japanese release, though, Neo instead roughly says, This seems to be due to Wrath of Cortex's Japanese title, roughly translating to Crash Bandicoot 4, Bursting Evil Spirit Power. So the joke falls flat in this version. Mostly. During the introduction to Dingodile and Madame Amber's boss fights, there are a few minor changes present. Let's start off with Dingodile. When our 2 main characters enter the room, the English version has Dingodile ask if it's cozy, but the Japanese version has him explicitly refer to Cortex instead before asking about the treasure, with Cortex being confused on what he's talking about. This seems to be altering the joke on the Australian accent to instead be how Cortex earlier was interested in obtaining the Evil Twins' treasure, only to immediately change his mind and forget about it. Now let's go into the latter. Madame Amberly is referred to as such in the credits. For an introduction cutscene though, Cortex calls her Amberly Kocho, aka the more formal headmistress Amberly. He also uses polite form when speaking to her, such as ending his evil scientist line with des. Both of these changes seem to have been done to add on to his implied fear of her. This last line is a bit more debatable, but I felt it would be worth discussing by itself. During Slipside Icecapades, Crash slides down through a parody of the Moulin Rouge, where Cortex suddenly shouts,
Mother?
Interestingly, in Japan, he instead says, Mama. This one is more debatable if intentional, but the term mama-san in Japan can be used to refer to the owner of an establishment, typically bars or nightclubs. Considering the location of a cabaret, I wonder if this is meant to allude to that. But, from the line lacking san, and Cortex seemingly being the owner instead, I'm admittedly not sure if the localization team actually meant the line to be read that way. I'll leave that for you to decide on. There is surely more that could be discussed regarding this version of the game, but I felt that would at least be enough for anyone interested in the subject. This also acts more so as an apology for not being able to work on my original idea. With that, while the differences between this and other releases may seem minor, I do believe they are just as worth discussing as the more wider known changes in the original trilogy. Localization is a hard process that is especially the case for the Crash Bandicoot series, where far more effort was put forth into accommodating for Japanese audiences. Even if this particular game failed in various regards, the minor alterations such as the credits, hands being left unaltered, and newfound glitches present tell a story about the localization production having issues alongside the English version. There is something still worth examining here, to put it more bluntly. In any case, hopefully you enjoyed this quick analysis regarding the Japanese release.
ここはどこだ？なんだこりゃ。